Hi there, Kings of War and Wargaming fans. Welcome to my little battle report video on Kings of War. Thank you very much for taking the time to check this out. My name is John. This is a battle I recently played on Universal Battle 2, an online platform for all us Wargaming fans missing in real life interaction. This is my first stab at making content of any kind, either video or through battle reports typed out or anything. I have been involved in some podcasts before, but this is the first time I've kind of stuck it by myself and seen what I could produce. Now, with the COVID-19 pandemic happening as it is, this has given me the opportunity to brush up my technical skills, which were zero, and really get my teeth stuck into producing a video of which I had a few ideas for, lolling around for some time, but have now been given the opportunity to get something out there. Now, hopefully you'll enjoy it. If so, that would be great, because I'd really like to be able to produce a few more and see how it goes. Right, without much further ado, let's crack on. So I guess I'd better start with the army that I'm going to be using today. Now, you could have told by the title, one of us is going to be using Empire of Dust. If you know me at all from the UK scene, you know that Empire of Dust is one of maybe only two armies that I actually have used in the tournament scene so far. Mostly because those are the only armies I've managed to get painted, and it's taken some time to get them painted. I'll tell you that now. So, Empire of Dust I've been using ever since the beginning of 2nd edition, and over that time they have really changed what works as a good combinations of what units are effective. This is one of the advantages of the Kings of War, and one of the biggest selling points is that despite me only using, say, 2 armies in a tournament-based scene, I've had the opportunity to try a multitude of different rules, different units, so that I can get the most out of each army. Now, this army that I'm using, and one of the reasons I wanted to play this particular game, is going to be for a tournament with the Kings of Hearts chaps in the UK. Now, they've put together a local tournament, online, I know, local, online, but it was designed for those people who would have been able to attend one of their events in real life. So what I wanted to do was create an army and try it out before going into this tournament. So this is an indication of what I will be using. And with the idea of producing more battle reports, I'm intending to try and get trying to get all of my games recorded like this and produced and see what people think. So, using those technical skills I've managed to polish up, let's see if I can get the army list to pop up. And here we go. So, one of the things I'm thinking is you guys can read an army list, so I don't need to be telling you everything that's in my army. It's there. So, I do want to give you, though, a rundown of my thought process. This is a slightly different army than I have used for Empire of Dust in the past. It includes a lot of the core elements that I would normally take. Soul Snare, everybody takes one of those. Monolith, everybody takes one of those, or should be taking one of those. Or what's the point in playing Empire of Dust? But what I've tried to do is create a few more units. Normally I would be running maybe in 2,000 points around about 10 or 11 units. So squeezing in a couple of extra drops can make a huge difference. And I've done that by taking mummy troops. Now, mummy troops, once you look at them on paper, you will realise that they are quite a tough little unit for the number of points that they have. They pack a punch, they have got resilience, included with their nerve and regeneration, that can make them last quite some time. So I want to drop as many of those in here as I could without losing some of maybe the stronger units I see in the Empire of Dust list, which are the Bone Giants, perfect for being able to surge into flanks and give you a little bit more range than the Empire of Dust normally have. I mean, admittedly, with the advent of more flying units for the Empire of Dust, I I shouldn't really say that these are the quickest units they can take, but they do give you a little bit of range over your foot troops. And if you've ever played or do play any of these lists using Surge, you realise that even 7 inches of movement can be quite effective once you add in 2 or 3 Surges. Now, the other units I think are one of the mainstays in an Empire Dust list are the Enslaved Guardians. They are one of the biggest hitters in the army. And you're a go-to if you want something that's going to cause pack a lot of punch. They're not the toughest units available to the Empire Dust, but in comparison to some of the other units at the same points value with the same offensive potential, they're very, very good. I mean, everybody talks about the Ogre Palace Guard for the Basilians as being the optimal unit in that army, and almost an auto-include. Enslaved Guardians are Ogre Palace Guard without the wavering value and the ability to be surged. Never look at surging, at least in my eyes, as a crutch. It's a perfect opportunity to get the most of each individual unit if used well. Now, I also did take as many heroes as I'm used to taking. I usually run around about 3 heroes or 3 individual heroes in a 2,000 point army list. But my thought process to get more units in, and because Emperor Dust characters are so expensive in points, I thought I would drop down to 2 and rely on the monolith's inspiring capabilities to keep the army going and keep the surges up to 3. So the 2 individuals I went for were the Pharaoh, which in 3rd edition, having it bumped back up to defense 6, I'm not sure is right, I'll be honest, because he is one tough cookie. And also, he can now take the Eternal Guard, which with all my mummy troops means I've got an ability to increase their potential with no real additional cost to each of the troops themselves, and the cost being put onto the Pharaoh, who is already tough to kill anyway. And the other character is a Leech Priest. Now, the Leech Priests have gone up in cost in 3rd edition, and they've maybe lost some of their capability in certain areas. But their Surge and Heal has never been better. With the 2 rerolls on any bone constructs, such as skeletons, revenants, bone giants in my army, that allows their Heal and Surge to be that little bit more reliable. I've also taken him because I can squeeze on weakness. Now, I've found weakness to be a very effective tool, especially for a defensive army like the Empire of Dust, to just keep enemies at bay or allow you to attack multiple units into one unit with less threat of the other units or one of the other units having an impact. Now, it's not an easy item or easy spell to use, especially on what's an already expensive character. So it's really kind of just a test bed to see if it's worth taking, because it does push that Leech Priest into almost 200 points. And he's only going to be able to use 1 spell a turn. But if I can use the right spell and he's got the right tools, maybe he will be just that little bit more effective. Okay, so there's my army list. I guess you want to know who I'm playing against. Well, right. The opponent for this game was James Mitchell. He is a chap I have played before in real life on the tabletop, but a while ago, and on a different game system. So this is the first time I played James at Kings of War. So for me, he's a new opponent, although it was a good opportunity to catch up with James and see how he's getting on. Now here is his list. He is taking the Twilight Kin. As before, you can see all the units that he's taking here. What was interesting from my point of view is he's taken a different Twilight Kin list than I've seen, or we've all seen, posted on some internet forums out there, revolving around his 2 Archfiends and some Elven troops, quite a lot of them. He's taking a solid core there of elves, shooting and spear kind, and then adding in a few dangerous elements with those two Archfiends, with the Shadow Hulk, and then a lot of chaff with the Gargoyles and Needlefangs. So this was interesting. This was going to be a different challenge. Now, we've all played against multiple flyers, so my main concern is that he's got two quite big, scary flyers. Not as scary some as the dragons out there, but still pretty dangerous. And if he can combine those with some of the other units in his army, this could be quite tough for me. But I think I've got the tools to deal with most of this. Let's see how it all plays out. So here we go. As you can see, we have skipped to the stage where we've applied terrain, loaded our armies in, and we've also rolled for scenario. So at this stage, we got the Kings of War map 8 loaded up, randomly rolled by James, and we are playing the Dominate scenario. So going in to deployment, my thought process is I'm going to have to make sure that I've got a sizable chunk of my unit strength able to move on to that objective and either hold it or be in a position to get onto it within the last few turns. Now, we also rolled to see who chose which side, and James chose to go top. So he's going to start the deployment. So let's get this game cracking. So here we go. Right, James starts off. He puts down a unit of Elven Archers. I counter that with a mummy troop. At this point in time, I'm just going to try to counter each of his drops with something on my own side to basically match up quite well against them. As we go along, I try to keep the army together so that Surge can be used effectively. So I'll just let all the units go down. I think I put down a giant to counteract the Hulk there. Yep. So the giant outranges the Hulk on a one-on-one charge. Similar kind of fighting characteristics, although the Hulk is probably a little bit more scary. So James puts over on the left some Abyssal Horsemen and some Gargoyles. I go for some Eternal Guardians. They are going to do well against the Abyssal Horsemen as long as they're not allowed to attack the Guardians first, hence why I've got the mummy troops, hoping to be able to chaff them up. You'll see that I try to put the mummies in between the Eternal Guardians so that I've got an ability to push them forward, but also chaff people up and use them as a surge threat to go into the flanks. So there we go, there is setup done. Now I feel setup has gone well. Looking at the armies arrayed against each other, you can see I've spread out quite well towards the left hand side, and I feel everything kind of left of the pool has been done well. Now you may have spotted it during the deployment, but the monolith was intended to go on the right hand side of those skeleton warriors. Only when I put him down did I realise, what about his surge capability? I need to be within 24 inches of everything on the left hand side. Simple reason being is that I can't afford for those Eternal Guardians to be outranged by any of those units or outmaneuvered by any of those units on James's left. So I had to move the monolith back into the middle. Now this has had an effect that I don't have any inspiring on those giants over there. So what I had to do during the game is move my leech, who is there right in the middle, right next to the monolith, and shuffle him over to that side so I could then get some inspiring but also a little bit of surge over on the right hand side. Apart from that, it's gone relatively smoothly. I think I've matched up well. As you can see on James's side, the two Archfiends are there looming at the back. My only concern with the setup with the Archfiends are behind units or too far behind units is they're not threatening the battlefield right from the start. There's nothing in my army that can hit him turn one. So he would have been well to do to push those Archfiends right onto the edge of his deployment and threaten me. Does it have a big impact on the game? We'll see. With all these things, it's all great with 2020 hindsight. But hey, there we go. So that's setup done. We rolled for first turn. It was James who got the decision, and he decided to let me go first. whether that's a good decision or a bad decision, I'm not able to threaten him in the first turn with any kind of shooting or anything like that. But what it does allow me to do is move forward. He would have been done quite well as, again, using those archfiends to just push me back, keep me back in my deployment zone, stop me from coming out too quickly. And then he'd have had the space to back up and then maybe counter me later on in the game, and he'd be able to put himself in a good position. But this is what happens on occasions. He does get the advantage of being able to move in the last turn, so we'll see if that makes a difference for him. Right, so let's get on to turn 1. Okay, so on to turn 1. Right, just do a little bit of checking on some of the ranges of James's units. Always good to do Universal Battle 2, just making sure that I don't outposition myself. So the plan will be to push my units forward to form a flat line, so I don't want to run the Enslaved Guardians too far forward. So I'm just going to move all the units up to form a battle line. I do throw the Pharaoh forward. He's tough, so I don't mind him being that far forward and being threatened by one of the Archfiends, but 2 would have been bad. But now he's in a good position in the following turns to do a bit of damage. Now you may have noticed the first or the second mistake so far is the Leech Priest moved twice. Now I realised at that point that I needed to get in the range of the Bone Giant, so I moved him a second time, but I shouldn't have been able to because he went over a wall. There we go. I'm cheating James already. Apart from that, I surged with the Monolith. He managed to get 7 out of 8 possible surges, which is pretty good. And then just spent some time just having a quick look and seeing where the ranges were on all the units, especially now with the Skeleton Warriors moving forward. So James is now taking his first turn, checking out a few moves, just seeing where he wants to position his units for the second turn. I was really interested to find out where he's going to go with those Archfiends, because those are the units I'm most afraid of at the moment, alongside the Abyssal Horsemen. So he's just positioning his units, trying to keep out of range at this point in time. I'm just checking where he's put them. Now, at this stage, I was still feeling a little bit confident. The archers here are going to try and do a little bit of damage onto the Skeleton Warriors, cause a couple of bits of damage. And there we go, that's the end of his first turn. So we move on to the second turn, or my second turn. Now, the plan doesn't really change too much. I want to stay out of range as much as I can. I don't mind so much the Skeleton Warriors being charged. And then I'm going to move all my other units into a position to threaten going into turn 3 or 4. Now, I realise the Archfiends are threatening my entire line, but as long as I can keep them from double charging me, I don't mind that too much. If one of them goes into one of the mummy troops, the mummy troops might even survive that. So I'm just going to keep my units where they are and see how he repositions. The left-hand flank is really kind of negated to him, because if he goes down there, I'm going to surge those Enslaved Guardians into the flank of him. Now, I did realise as well, after moving everything, that my giant was out of position where I wanted to be. I wanted to be able to run up the flank of that Hulk without the worry of him being charged by using some surge from the Monolith. Now, James was nice enough to allow me to go back. We looked over the notes and I realised it was 2.5 inches before he turned, so we just repositioned it. We did that, but he only got surged 2 inches by the Monolith anyway. There we go. Now, I used the Soul Snare to cause a bit of damage onto his Tall Spears because they were an easy target. I wasn't worried so much about the Gargoyles because the Gargoyles could regen the wounds. I was just thinking if I put maybe 1 or 2, maybe more wounds on with the Soul Snare, then they're going to be easier targets later on. Now, at this point, after I'd finished deploying, I realised that I may have left a little mistake. You guys may have noticed it, but the Pharaoh is quite far forward. I'd positioned him there realising he wasn't going to be able to be charged by 2 Archfiends, but at the same time I had not realised that he was in range of the Abyssal Horsemen. So this could lead to a double charge from the Horsemen and one of the Abyssal, the Archfiends, which could be disastrous because they could one-shot a Pharaoh. He's tough, but he's not going to be able to take that kind of damage. So I only realised it then. And plus also, if he got it right, he may have been able to overrun into my troops. But as you can see, he put his gargoyles over, trying to chaff up my my mummies. He decided, well, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to throw those guys in. Stop you from being able to surge back. And then you'll notice a lot of his charges are one-on-one units. If there's one thing that I think that James may have benefited from was more combination strikes. So using his chaff to stop me from being able to get to his units, but using 2 units to take out one of mine. The Empire of Dust are a tough army to just cause a little bit of damage on, because they have the capability of being able to regen and heal. So there we go. These mistakes are easy to make. I'm not blaming James. It's one of the easy things to do is go, right, well, I need to be able to engage every unit and stop them from charging. But I thought he'd have benefited a lot more from double charges onto some of my units. So as you can see, we're doing a little bit of damage just going down onto my units for each of these injured ones. Nothing too significant. So in actual fact, everything survives. So we go into my third turn. I start to do some regens on the mummies and the pharaoh. I do them all in one go just for ease. James did point out to me that I should really do it each time a unit is activated. And I said, I told him, well, okay, that's great. Do you want me to change it back now, or do you want me to change it next time we next turn? And he said, that's fine, keep it as it is, but next turn do it one by one. As long as he's happy with that, that's fine. A little bit of conversation with your opponents just to clear it makes a huge difference. Now, this leads to an interesting play I decided to do. I decided that the Skeleton Warriors didn't need to countercharge the tall spears. My thought process is if I countercharge the tall spears, then they're going to be able to hit me back on 4s unhindered. Skeletons aren't going to do a huge amount of damage. So my thought process is how can I get the skeletons out of range but still carry on with the rest of my units? So I moved the units, as you can see here. Monolith slid out of the way, the mummies moved back, and then the Skeleton Warriors were able to get into a position where they're over an inch for every single unit after disengaging and sliding. So I was now able to surge the mummies in at a later time to go back into the Archfiend. The mummies would be hindered, but it does mean that I've still got a pretty good chance of causing that 1 point of damage to stop them from flying over and causing havoc in my back lines. So a bit more shuffling. You can see a few counter charges in here. So apart from the counter charges, the Giant and the Enslaved Guardians go back in. We also see just a little bit of manoeuvring just to check that my Leech Priest was out of sight behind the Bone Giants there. So it's looking pretty good. Here comes a surge from the Monolith. There we go. Over gets into the Archfiend quite easily. A little bit risky, but I thought it was well worth taking the risk at that point in time. So the Soul Snare fires into the Gargoyles that are fighting the left-hand mummy troop just to cause a bit of damage, but then also heal the Enslaved Guardians that have been hit by the Archfiend. And then I threw a little cheeky weakness into the Hulk. My thought process is the Hulk coming in next turn, plus the Soulbane would have caused quite a bit of damage to that Bone Giant. So I was hoping just to mitigate as much of that as I can do. So here we go. Here the combat's going along. I managed to waver the Needlefangs. And you can see you've got the damage I needed on the Archfiend to stop him flying over. This combat against the Gargoyles looks like it's only going to go one way, but we roll the dice anyway. Always make sure you roll the dice. It's the only fair way I feel to be able to do this in Kings of War. And with Universal Battle, it's a very easy thing to do. So I manoeuvre myself in a position to counteract the left-hand flank with the Guardians and push the mummies around so that I can then charge the Archfiend. Right, there we go. Managed to get rid of the Gargoyles with the mummy troop. Enslaved Guardians do a fair bit of damage to the Archfiend, but they are okay. And then the Pharaoh does that 1 point of damage. He only needed one, but it's enough. So we strip the Thunderous away from the Abyssal Horseman. So going over to James's turn 3. Now he does something I didn't quite expect here. Is he uses the Soulbane in combination with his Tall Spears to take on the Skeleton Warriors. I still think the odds were good here. I mean, he did 7 wounds last turn, or 7 damage last turn, hindered. So he now looks to do the same thing again with the tall spears plus the Soulbane. Nerve 22, I think I had a little bit of a chance, but we'll see. Now this is one thing I didn't really see him doing, which is a disengage with the Abyssal Horseman, which gave him just enough arc to then charge into the Enslaved Guardians. I still think this is a good fight for the Enslaved Guardians. They are not going to take enough damage in one attack by a unit of Abyssal Horsemen without the Thunderous Charge, so I wasn't too bad with that, and everything else counter charges. A bit of shooting from the archers didn't do anything, and we go straight into the combat. You can see the Shadowhawk didn't do enough damage on the Bone Giant. And we now come to the Tall Spears and the Soulbane. That's a lot of damage going down on those skeletons. And yeah, there we go. For all my manoeuvring about, I didn't need to bother. They were going to get killed anyway. A good move here from James. He backs up his units to try and reduce the number of units able to see his flank, which is good. I was thinking of possibly doing that with one of the Bone Giants. The Archfiend as well gets a bit unlucky not killing the Mummy Troop. So he's going to be put in a bad position with mummies staring down his flank. The Abyssal Horsemen do a bit of damage, but that's just not going to be enough. The Guardians are going to survive through that, and they also survive the Archfiend. So into my turn 4. Now, to a certain extent, this left flank looks like it's going to get mopped up. I've got enough damage on the Archfiend. I've got flanks on the Central Archfiend and on the Abyssal Horsemen. That looks pretty much set. Over on the right hand side though is not looking so rosy. So the Giants are counter charging to try and cause as much damage as they can, and then the little swarm is doing what the little swarm does and just getting in the way. So they jump into the Tall Spears, but the Tall Spears are only taken 1 damage so far, so it's looking a little bit ropey in the centre. So I'm going to have to hope I mop up those units on the left quick and get over there. Being turn 4, I've only got another 2 turns after this to move. So there's an opportunity for me to use the Soul Snare. I was going to use it in the Central Archfiend, but I realised I was just out of arc. I had backed him up a little bit, but not enough. So I chose to go on the left Archfiend just to make sure he goes in, and then heal those Central Enslaved Guardians. So combat's come up. Archfiend taking a lot of damage from both the Pharaoh and the Enslaved Guardians, and goes down. Not kind of unexpected. A little bit of a shuffle from the Pharaoh to get him closer to the right hand side. Now, combat against the Abyssal Horseman looks pretty dodgy with 20 attacks with Elite going in the flank there. But the dreaded double one. With the Abyssal Horseman is still alive, and with Regenerate, this is going to be tough for the Enslaved Guardians, all the mummies, whoever ends up attacking. Now, we then also see the Central Archfiend going down to the 2 mummy troops. They didn't do that much damage. You can see there, it was only 11 damage on the Archfiend, so I still needed to get a 7 twice. So that was a bit of a lucky roll. So in hindsight, maybe getting the Archfiend killed and the Abyssal Horseman surviving but severely damaged, not too bad. Not too bad. And then we go over to the Giants. The Needlefangs are taken up by the Central Giant, and then the right-hand Giant does a little bit of damage to the Shadowhawk, but not much. So that's it for my turn 4. We go on to James's turn 4. We see some counter charges with the Tall Spears and the Hulk, and then the regen on the Abyssal Horseman is huge, and they go back into the Enslaved Guardians. I was a little bit nervous after seeing that. Enslaved Guardians still should survive, but we'll see. We go into the combat. The archers again didn't do much. They're nerfed in version 3, guys. They're not very good. So we see some damage going onto the Bone Giant, and then we see a massive pickup. The Abyssal Horsemen ride through my Enslaved Guardians. Now that's a huge amount of unit strength gone with that attack. I'm in a good position to charge him, but it's still, he's holding me up a little bit, and I've lost some unit strength. So that is the end of James's turn 4. We're going to move into turn 5. Oh, sorry. The Swarm went down to the Tall Spears. Big surprise. Now, you can see here, I am just checking out a couple of manoeuvres with my Giants. Now, everybody knows the Giants' footprint, being only 50 mil, makes a massive difference over some of the Titans out there on 75 mils. I think I can get both Giants in, but one will have to surge. If you noticed earlier on, the first Bone Giant, he is just in arc of the flank of those Tall Spears. They had backed off from the swarm just enough to give him an arc, so he can back up, turn, and squeeze between the Hulk, and then get into the flank. I'm just working out whether I can surge the Bone Giant in and what's going to be the final position of the mummies when they charge. And I keep humming and ahhing, going back, seeing what the distance is going to be on the surge. And then after all that, I think I finally decide there's no point in me turning. I might as well just shuffle across. I'll still be in the front. I'll still be able to get the mummies in. It's going to be a 4 on the surge. I've got 2 surges. It should be okay. There we go. There we see the Bone Giant going in. Just checking that the Bone Giant there is not going to be surged into his flank, and he's got enough space to hit the corner of the tall spears there. The mummy's obviously going in as well. I just regen them as I go in. Nice little extra wound taken off. Thick chaff with a regen. Love it. Okay, so I just check here to make sure the enslaved guardians can see the Abyssal Horsemen, because they're behind my units. I have to make sure I can at least see them before I do the charges. Pharaoh gets himself out of the way, and then we're going to see a combo charge from both the enslaved guardians and mummies. I've got to kill him this time, guys, haven't I? I've got to kill him. I can't afford to lose another enslaved guardian unit. The Soul Stair moves up past. I reposition the mummies. I was thinking here that I could possibly surge into a flank, but I realised that the giant needs it more than anybody else, so I kept them just in a position to threaten the flank and then possibly go into the archers. Oh, there we go. Giant gets with an easy surge from the Leech Priest. And then a couple more extra bits of damage from the Soul Snare onto the Tall Spears. Now, the interesting thing is when you see that red cross, that is the Leech Priest having put weakness onto the Tall Spears. I thought, rather than try to heal some of the units that I've got there, I don't think enough of them are in threat to be killed, but I'd be better off just ensuring if the Tall Spears do counterattack, I've got a good chance to survive whatever they hit. Now we're going to go into the nerve. He's got a load of wounds on there. 21, 23. No. Another double 1. Oh, well, at least the Abyssal Horsemen went down. You can see on the left-hand side, they've gone down. The mummies and enslaved guardians are running as quick as they can to get into the middle. James just points out as he goes into his turn 5, they're not even devastated, those tall spears. So, well, at least I've got weakness on them. I planned it all the time, obviously. So James is doing a good thing, measuring some distances, just checking to see what's under threat, what isn't under threat. The tall spears go back into the mummy troop in the middle, and he just repositions his Shadow Hulk to be in a really good position in the next turn. The Leech Priest here is going to be able to be charged by the Soulbane. If I'm honest, I don't mind him charging the Leech Priest. The Leech Priest doesn't score me any points. He does act as a bit of inspiring, but you can see the Monolith is on his way up now, and he can lend his inspiring across what is left over on that flank. But with Nerve 13, even with Soulbane's 5 attacks and Dread, he's still got a good chance of surviving. There we go. He's taking 3 wounds, but he's okay. Tall Spears. And they put him on 12 damage, but no. He owed me a double 1. So he's got a double 1 now to match my double 1. We're almost even. He's got 1 more. He still owes me another 1. Right. I think I am just going to pause it there for a second. So, you can see here that I have managed to move my Bone Giant into a very interesting position. This is not right. I'd not noticed it until I replayed the battle, so I think it's worth pointing out. What I thought I could do is, because that Bone Giant's not engaged by the Tall Spears, they had gone into the mummies the previous turn, I thought I had a perfect opportunity to evade everything by turning him 90 degrees and just moving forward 7. Now, if he'd been engaged by the Tall Spears, he would have been able to withdraw and do that maneuver anyway. But because he wasn't, as long as he moves out of further away from the Tall Spears than when he started the turn, he'd be fine. So with the Tall Spears being in there, that's perfectly fine as maneuver. But he has then maneuvered himself with a Shadow Hulk just right behind him. The Shadow Hulk was just over an inch away. So the Bone Giant is not allowed to be within an inch of that Shadow Hulk. And as you can see, he must have passed within an inch of that Shadow Hulk to do that maneuver. Now, that basically means I couldn't be able to do that. But I would have been able to achieve the same effect by turning 90 degrees counterclockwise and going down the board. Because I've got a 7-inch move, I can still get further away from the tall spears as possible, and I'd never end up being within an inch of the Shadowhawk. Doesn't really affect this game, but it is a learning point. I have to be careful about units behind. It's very easy to do that, and an inexperienced player, I didn't think James necessarily saw that, or else he would have pointed out. A more experienced player may have pointed out, but I might have done it to them as well. And on the field, I felt pretty aggrieved if that had affected the outcome of the result. But in this instance, I don't think it would have, because he would have then been in a position just in front of that monolith and just away, out of the way of the bone giant, who you've just noticed is slid a little bit to the right hand side. Not being engaged by the tall spears, he doesn't have to be over an inch away from tall spears when he finishes his move. But with his 3.5 inch move from there, it now puts him into the flank of the Shadowhawk. For you guessed it, some surging shenanigans. Right, so let's crack on and get back onto the game. So there we go. Everybody makes mistakes. What else? What else are you do? We're only human. So we go back into it. We can see the mummies are now putting themselves into a good position to affect the kindred archers further on, and I've also managed to get a flank into the tall spears, although hindered from the other mummy troop coming up, and all the rest of my units move forward. Now you'll notice that James is just measuring to make sure how far away my enslaved guardians are. At the moment they are over 12 inches away, but don't forget, surge cures all. So there we go. The bone giant has been surged in by the monolith into the flank of the Shadowhawk, and the Pharaoh does his work and moves the enslaved guardians forward. Funny enough, the leech can't do anything at this point in time because he's just been attacked by the Soulbane, but there we go. What can we do? Right, so we go over into the combat. The mummy's here. No, first we're going to go to a Shadowhawk. Yeah, bang. Flank from a bone giant can be deadly. I'll take it any day of the week. And then we go into the tall spears. Do enough damage. They were already at that point where they were going to die anyway. So anything but a double one, and bang, they're gone. So there we go. It now is into James's turn 6. And that is it. James decided that, having looked at the scenario, he wasn't in a position to do anything to counter what I had left on the tabletop. To a certain extent, I can understand that. I personally would never opt not to play out the final turn, only for my opponent's sake. But I can totally understand his point of view. There's very little he can do from this point of view to get back in the game. At this point in time, I've got unit strength 5 definitely within 12 inches of the centre of the table. I possibly have the bone giants for the majority within 12 inches of the centre of the table. So that's a possible that unit strength of 7, 8. Quick check. Yeah, so it's actually 6 in the middle, and then 1 for each of the bone giants, and then only unit strength 2 each of the archer units. So it does make it a little bit tricky. So I can totally understand his viewpoint, but it was a fun game. I mean, what I did is I spent a lot of the time after this just discussing what I'd seen during the game. I didn't mention the mistakes I made, funny enough. But he's going to watch this now, so he can he can mention them back to me. But I tried to give him a few pointers on what I thought I saw, especially on that second turn charge. Going back to it, it just made more sense for me to get a couple of his heavy hitters into 1, maybe 2 of my units and just try and take them out. Killing a Pharaoh is no small deal. It's still it's not a scoring threat, but it is one of my surges. It's one of the inspiring. If you can take him off the board and get unlucky overrun as well, he could have caused some serious damage over that left-hand flank. And I have to take that as food for thought. I've got to make sure my Pharaoh, no matter how tough he is, I don't leave in a position for him to be struck by such heavy-hitting troops. But there we go. It was a really fun game. I really like this Empire of Dust list. I really like it. It is something that just allows me to do so many things, and the surging shenanigans are coming from every angle. The mummies, great chaff, and the enslaved guardians, really heavy hitters, and then the bone giants fit in somewhere in between. They do a bit of damage. They get in the way. Yeah, I'm quite enjoying it. I'll probably get found out completely against certain armies. I think we're going to struggle against things with lots of range shooting, or bigger, heavier hitters that can take one or two of my units off in a turn and then leave me exposed. But we'll see. This is the fun of Kings of War. We get to try so many different types of armies, so many different types of opponents, so many different ways of playing this game. It offers so many tactical solutions. Right, here we go. So let's just move on into a conclusion. Right, guys, that is it. Thank you very much for spending time to watch this video. I would really appreciate any feedback that you feel is relevant, positive. I know some's going to be negative, but as much positive stuff that how this could be improved would be great. For all those guys who are new, if you were interested in any of the things that we discussed here, and interested in getting to Kings of War, I put a few links at the bottom of this video in the description. So all the things I talked about, you could link to those and get yourselves involved. You got any queries about tactics, etc. that I'm using, then please post them up as well. If you've got any insight or want to know a little bit more than happy to answer any of your questions. Going forward, I'm hoping to have at least another 4 attempts at this. I think if I can record all of my games from the Kings of Heart tournament, then I could then reassess at that point in time and see how it's gone, see what I could do to improve, and kind of go from there. But until that point, thank you very much for listening, and have yourselves a lovely evening. Thank you.